So I got thinking a lot about 1st and 2nd Kings in the last couple of weeks, and I'm thinking they're difficult books to read. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of killing. There's a lot going on in these books, but the more I read through them, the more I realized that many of those emotions are emotions that we go through every day of our life. Scholars agree that 1st and 2nd Kings is a compilation of texts that includes the succession narratives, the book of Acts of Solomon, and the history of the monarchs, and that they were written during the time of exile, when the saving history of Israel seemed to be at a standstill. The books were written to support the people that were coping with defeat and despair, to strengthen the people of Israel in their obedience to the law, and to point out to Solomon's wisdom and his relationship to God as a model. Solomon understood the fear of the Lord, and he understood that it was the beginning of wisdom. And this section of 1 Kings is called Solomon's prayer of dedication for the temple, and it discloses some of his wisdom and understanding, his spirit of counsel and might, his spirit of knowledge and a fear of the Lord. Solomon begins by acknowledging God's transcendence and immanence all in one breath. There is no other God like you, in heaven above or on earth below. And then he quickly follows it with a wise comment. Will God dwell upon the earth? Is God present with us? How do we know? Well, that's the exiles' question too. They're frustrated. Seems like God has deserted them. Nebuchadnezzar and all his troops had descended upon them and ravaged Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, killed the sons of the Israelites, left their daughters as grieving widows. And the Israelites questioned, where is God? Is God here? And then after Nebuchadnezzar sent his troops to scatter the people, they were all in exile. And the Israelites questioned, will God dwell upon the earth? I think sometimes this is our question too. The question of God's presence, especially when we're in the desert times of our life. It comes from deep within us, and it comes out of our own experiences as we deal with life's frustrations. Now, I don't know about you, maybe you never have any frustrations in your life. But the more I thought about 1 Kings, the more I realized how many times in my life I feel frustrated about something. And I think that frustrations are a simple fact of life. They come to us in a variety of ways. They come to us when our hopes and our dreams and our plans are blocked. They come when some cherished project is hindered. Frustration comes when you set out towards some goal or some dream in life, and then life cruelly slams the door right in your face. The biography of any one of our lives would have to include certain instances where we hoped and we dreamed and we planned for some particular event, and it never came to pass. And we're left feeling frustrated. The feeling of frustration is something that I think we all encounter. When you read the Bible again and again, you hear the stories of people of faith who wrestled with that very thing. Think about Moses. Moses put up with those people for 40 years, leading them through the desert while they complained and complained and complained. And then finally, they're crossing into the land of milk and honey. He can see it, and I can picture where he's standing while he's looking into Israel. And God says, oh, guess what? You're not going. Wow. I can't imagine how frustrated Moses had to feel. Let's face it, there's something that we have to all learn in life, and that is that there will be frustrations in our lives. And the thing is, we have to decide, how do we deal with those frustrations? It's not, are we going to have them? Because we are. So how do we deal with them? Perhaps the most poignant instance of frustration is what we heard a glimpse of today. God bless you. David's desire to build a temple for the Lord. He wanted that so much. He thought that's what his whole life had been about. He knew that God favored him and had made him a wonderful king and had put him above all of his people, and he wanted to honor God and build this temple. And God says, no, you're not going to build it. Somebody after you, you're going to be dead and gone. Somebody after you is going to build it. David's heart was broken. His hopes were destroyed, and he was frustrated that he could not have his dream come true. So the question is not if we're going to experience frustration, but how are we going to deal with frustration? What are we going to do when our hopes and our dreams end up in heartbreaking frustration? Where will we find the strength to prevent us from being emotionally crushed by the frustrations of life, which will surely come? Well, I think when it comes to frustration, there's two kinds of people in the world. There are those people who see their dreams slashed against the wall, and then their frustrations cause them to give up. They just don't have the strength to go on. They can't take the heat of their failure again. And so they give up in defeat. And then there's the second kind of people, those who will not accept the defeat as the final answer. The second group might be frustrated because their dream didn't become a reality, but because they refuse to accept that defeat as the final, they discover that the frustration will eventually pass, and there will be new opportunities for them. Not maybe what they hoped for, but maybe even better. When I was in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, I met a man who shared his story with me. He had been married for quite a long time, and he and his wife had recently gotten a divorce. His hopes and his dreams for his career had been shattered. He'd lost his job, and the new job that he had was paying him about 50% of what the other job paid. He had to sell his home, and he was now living in a small apartment, and he was having to dip into what little savings he had just to pay his bills. His story went on, and it was a difficult story to hear. But then he said to me, there's one biblical phrase that keeps coming to me in the last couple of months, over and over. Every time I get discouraged, this phrase pops into my head. And this too shall pass. There's something to be said about dealing with frustration in this manner. Whenever frustration comes your way, don't give up, because this too shall pass. Things do not last forever. There is always change. Yes, I said that dreaded word, change. But there is always change. So when frustration comes your way in life, don't give up to defeat or despair or to failure. Don't allow the frustrations of your life to cause you to give up. Simply remember that this too shall pass. So often the frustrations that come into our lives sometimes come because of the failure of another person, or because of the betrayal of someone, or because of the triumph of someone over another. And in moments like that, sometimes frustration combines with hostility and a desire for revenge. There's a bumper sticker that says, "Don't get mad, get even." Well, getting even may be the philosophy of this world, but it was not the philosophy of our Lord Jesus Christ. The way of Christ is the way of forgiveness. David knew that he would not be allowed to build his temple, but he refused to shake his fists at the heavens and demand that this dream be fulfilled. Instead, he decided to give God a chance. For after all, how many times in David's life had God given him chances? David laid the foundation, though, and prepared his people for the temple that would come, and the temple that he would never see. And years later, when this magnificent temple stood complete, the people of Israel called it Solomon's temple, but it really was David's achievement. Solomon could never have done it on his own. David laid all the foundation. David prayed and sacrificed and toiled and kept that vision constantly before the people and trusted that God, in God's own time, would show a way out of that frustration for David. And that's what we have to do with our hopes and our dreams are shattered. Instead of giving up to our own frustrations, pray, sacrifice, work, and trust that God will bring something good out of the rubbish heap of our frustrations. May it be so for you and for me.